All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of SuperFreq. I am your host, Talia. So today I want to talk about something specifically around growth and relational dynamics. This is coming off of several questions that came in through the hub and DMs and so on and so forth. So I think it's a good time to address this from a QP perspective. So settle into the body, and we'll kind of turn this into a meditation as I continue to kind of build on these concepts. And as always, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for listening and sharing the podcast and continuing to have this work, reach people. It's a really critical time. It's just very interesting what's happening in the collective right now. You can almost feel and start to see how obvious the illusion really is. And people are really, really drastically shifting to wanting a slower, simpler life. And interests are abundant right now. Online is so unbelievably contrived that everything at this point is a performance. And so you kind of have to decide, at least for me, where do I feel nourishes me the most? Where do I feel personally feels like more in alignment with me? And how deep can I trust the process of what's unfolding with what's unknown? And right now it's making the podcasts and writing on Substack and then occasionally posting on stories. So it really means a lot that you guys have stuck around this long and seen not only me evolve, but, ideally you guys have been able to change just by listening in the process. So why your growth destabilizes relationships is what I'm going to look at today. And there's two questions I specifically want to answer. Why people lose capacity for you when your signal, which essentially is just state, identity, or behavior changes. And then why family systems destabilized, sometimes even physically and emotionally when you shift. So first, I want to create a little bit of a primer. So your reality is rendered through structured systems. And there's individual systems, and that creates a larger kind of architecture, a meta system, if you will. And there's 5 things that I'm focusing on a lot, as I continue to kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture. I'm distilling the information down to just very, very constrained, parameters. And you'll see why in a minute. Because the details get really murky. They get translated so differently, and everyone's going to pace in different ways. But ultimately, you kind of arrive at a very, very simple. My goal right now is how can I distill information into kind of the first principle definition, just the simplest thing. So I talk a lot more about the depth of this in the lab, which is a more advanced group. And then I touch on these concepts at various levels in the Field Hub, which is the membership. And I really encourage you guys, if you haven't considered joining that, to take a look. Give yourself 90 days. There's so much value in there. The community is fantastic. And so I just encourage you taking a look at that at taliaverse.com. Okay, so your reality is rendered through a structured system. First, through prediction. Okay, it's generating prediction. We know that the brain and the nervous system is built as just a prediction generating machine. The second is the constraint, which is kind of this discipline that I have now where I ruthlessly reduce things that are unnecessary in my life, whether or not that be things that I own, behaviors that I have, patterns that I have, what I usually tolerate, what I've tolerated before in the past. I just ruthlessly reduce so I can create a tremendous amount of constraint, because in design, they talk a lot about this. It's all about white space. And when I was very, very early on in my fashion career and marketing career, behavior career, and just working on design, constraint was liberation. So the more constraint I put on myself, and I just, let's say, only, operated in two colors, black and white, what can you do? How much can you reduce that's unnecessary? And that is a limiter. So by creating the constraint, you actually have all of this choice within a very limited bandwidth. The next thing is conditions. These are actually the stabilizers. And you'll see that people can stabilize in distortion, or they can stabilize after they've had these big up levels. The next is boundaries. These are, the selectors, what you allow in, what you allow out. They're kind of like the bouncer of your life. And then, of course, permissions, which I look at as gates. So interestingly enough, when you work on the spine and you get entrainments, or you work with a chiropractor, or you're doing spinal energetics or some of the stuff that you may see online, I currently am doing a combination of, I just happen to have a very fantastic practitioner who does both entrainments and physical traditional chiropractic, but they're working on gates as much as they're working on the electrical system of the body through the spine. So your relationships and your reality are a direct reflection of this stack. Okay. So what gets generated, what is limited within that prediction model, what stabilizes it through conditions, and then the boundaries that operate as a bouncer, and then the permissions that you allow. So you don't outgrow people because you're better than them. You outgrow them because your system is no longer organized the same way. And you see kind of what you settled for before. You see where the holes are, and you see how much you've held together, and for people around you, for relationships, for family members, your kids, etc. I see this a lot with women. There's a lot of burnout that's happening. There's a lot of hormones that have been compromised because of what women have had to hold, and how little we feel we've been supported over over lifetimes. So you outgrow people, places, and things because your system is no longer organized the same way, and that breaks the agreements. Okay, there's always a field agreement at play that your relationships were built on. So your signal, when I say that, by the way, guys, it's not vibes. Okay, it is and it's not. Vibe is kind of a very fun narrative to describe it, but it's structure. So your signal is, or I'll say equals, your nervous system state plus your identity configuration that's constantly kind of optimizing, plus the predictive model that you're operating. So when that changes, your reactions change, your tolerance changes, and what you participate in changes, what you reinforce changes. So people don't just feel that shift, they lose touch with predictability, with access to you, with the way that they want to control, which is oftenly unconscious, okay? And that's the real disruption. So if you once tolerated or didn't have a lot of boundaries, or spread yourself extraordinarily thin because you've been working on disempowerment patterns or worthiness or people-pleasing or hyper-independence, and you start to really get a handle on this pattern, okay, by way of meeting yourself in different ways, it's super, super important. When you meet yourself differently, the loop, okay, patterns are just a loop, and that loop is creating prediction. When you catch it right before it closes and you step into contrary action, it creates an error signal, okay? And the more you do that and you confirm, delete these patterns, contrary action, contrary behavior, creates a contrary experience, your field changes. So frequency first, field reorganizes, then you pull it through form. If you just work on frequency and form without acknowledging the field, it's like two legs on a stool. If you just focus on frequency and bypass the rest, okay, it's also like on a one-legged stool. So patterns at the origin level, based on what your field can tolerate now without completely disintegrating your identity, okay, which basically just is like psychic fragmentation. So you pull it through the frequency at whatever level you can hold it, okay? You settle into integration so the field reorganizes, and then you continue to pull that through the body, and you let that become kind of like your holy trinity, if you will. It really becomes a cycle. So frequency, field, form. Your field will do the fielding for you. I kind of have an ongoing joke, but it's true, is that the field is fielding. And you can have immensely close relationships that instantly change overnight. I've had this more times than I can count. I've seen it so many times. I've advised clients through this so many times. And whatever is meant for you, okay, that will amplify you will come back from a higher level order. So yes, you can grieve what's changed, but this is where trust comes in, because you do not want to have to self-edit and continue to negotiate with your level of, let's say, integrity to maintain what's comfortable and known, because you don't want to be alone, or you don't want to be whatever, or. So a very high coherent individual, or a very coherent individual, will have high integrity predictability. This is kind of like my new favorite slogan to myself, is anytime I look at, the archives of the sacred, or I'm perusing ancient texts or researching or just getting a tremendous amount of information, more than I know how to conduct at this point. I mean, I'm constantly trying to pull it through the body, and that's why I've amped up my body care at the moment, and it's starting to work, and I'm able to kind of separate out what's necessary and what's not necessary to the best of my ability now. That's why I'm in this ruthlessly reduce, like how much can I compress information, kick out what's not needed, and just hold this signal. But high integrity prediction. And I was like, boom, I can remember that for sure. So what would a person with very high integrity in terms of prediction settle for or do? The version of me that I want to inhabit, that I'm continuing to inhabit, okay? You guys have watched me move through all of this. What would she tolerate and not tolerate? And I step into those. I continue to support the actions of a high integrity predictive person, because that's what I want to have in my life. That's the standards I have of other people around me, no matter who they are, friends, family, whoever. I'm calling everyone I can to the highest level of potential and not accepting anything less from them. And that's can be very, very uncomfortable. So when you start to change, all of your reactions will change. You will start to see people differently, and you will start to see their logic, okay, the way that they explain things, how they show up for you. You will start to have a hard time with having conversations. Conversations will suddenly feel difficult. You'll be frustrated that people won't be able to pace with you, because you're able to oscillate at a faster individuated rate, much more embodied than you were before. And that it becomes really heavy. The heaviness it is to be able to hold other people is not conducive. That is going to break down. It's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for other people. And so new 0 points have to be created. And sometimes people just need grace and space, and reorganization ensues. So that is the real disruption, is predictability, access to you, and then control. If they don't feel like they have control over the dynamic or over whatever it is or they feel like they're holding on to it, and you do not tolerate that in your life, that is going to be a big disruption point. So relationships are built on shared regulation contracts, knowingly, unknowingly, okay? Most relationships aren't built on truth. They're built on regulation loops. Okay, relationships are built on predictability. And this is, again, why things will break down. If the identity that you were running 20 years ago is the identity that you're radically working on dismantling now, but it's the same identity that you attracted your partner with, there's going to be breakdowns in your relationship. This is a pacing issue. Okay? So if you stay small, they feel safe. If you over-explain, they feel in control. You absorb the emotion, then they don't have to process. So when that dynamic breaks down and it's no longer congrusive to the field will field. And when you change your combination of signal, the nervous system with the identity configuration that you're running, plus the predictive model, when you change all of that, and you will do that, despite yourself, it is inevitable in frequency work if you stay consistent with it, okay? you stop completing the loop. Okay, so the system does what systems do. It tries to restore equilibrium at all costs. Okay, so this will look like emotional discharge. Okay, it'll look like guilt, confusion, criticism. You've changed, emotional withdrawal, shutdown. And it's not because you've done something wrong. Okay, it's because you broke the loop. Okay, you broke the agreement. And there is a scattering when that happens. So let's see. I want to touch on something that's probably going to be uncomfortable for a lot of you, but when you change, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, there's a handful of you who are at a crossroads right now, and you're kind of having to decide who you're going to be and what you're willing to do to try to experience more of that person, that version of you that you really want to inhabit. And you've kind of gone too far to turn back, but it's getting too uncomfortable to kind of maybe continue. And you're in this idle kind of deciding. And the reason why that is because you moved through a tremendous amount of change in a short period of time. And that compression caused instability. So because the system, usually coming from a very hypervigilant, conditioned, let's say strategy, nervous system strategy that was conditioned from very early programming as a child. You looked around, you weren't unmet, you co-regulated with a really, really anxious parent or an unavailable parent, and you created strategies to keep yourself safe no matter what at all cost, okay? And when you start to slow down and unravel that, your nervous system is going to panic. And right when you're on the threshold of moving into a different identity, it's going to look around and go, fuck, and immediately reach back because the system is designed to resolve at any, okay, it's going to resolve and reach equilibrium no matter what, at all costs. It's going to reach back and reference any identity that you just moved through that was the most stable and coherent and lock it down. Boom. I'm so sorry we lost your phone. When's the last time you did a data backup? Oh, like 2015. Like, okay, well, we can restore that. How's that? Or you lose all your contacts, you lose everything that was saved. And this is when people start to panic, and then the emotional meaning making and the narrative making kicks in, and you just settle for that recent backup, cloud backup, and then you just settle, you take that, and then you start making decisions from that logic. And that's why people feel like the work isn't working or things aren't changing. Because there was just a part of you that didn't know how to meet yourself in the void of the unknown when things got really, really heavy. So you immediately moved into action and override, okay? You kind of moved your highest selves out of the way, moved into like override, doing whatever I can do in the physical to get my life the way that I want it. You know, I've got to survive at all costs. I'm not being supported. Maybe your partner isn't working. Maybe there's been some financial issues that come up. Maybe there's, you're up against a house sale. You're having to move this and there's just too much. And so the person who makes the most money, sometimes I see a lot of dynamics where the women are really carrying it right now, or vice versa. You're in a relationship and women can't leave because they've chosen to stay home with the families and it's getting really dicey. Let me get a drink of water. Hold on. And so there's collapse. If you can, these are these very, very high threshold, high radiation moments. And what I mean by high radiation is consciousness is very high levels of radiation. And I started talking about this and people didn't really understand what that meant. And if you have any questions about what radiation or radiation light is, let me know in the comments. But a really, really great example of this would be the Shroud of Turin that scientists still can't explain. And they've all conceded that it's impossible for this negative image pre-photography to have such a perfect imprintation of what archaeologists and scientists alike and physicists are all referring to as the being known as Yeshua. But it's just a fascinating case study because it was a burst of radiation that created the image. And it's just super fascinating because as biophotonic, light beings, piezo computers, basically. We have a system that operates very much like a computer. Your brain and your nervous system have no idea what time is. You only know it when you create meaning around it. And we're trying to be able to metabolize more light, okay? And light is just information. And when you know how to manipulate that, and we can create the boundaries and the containment and the permissions, and you can generate a solid projection of yourself no matter what, you do that through radiation. So I don't know where I got off on that, but what was I talking about? Oh, anyway, it'll come back. Consciousness is radiation. So when you're up against a massive threshold, okay, and it's really, really uncomfortable, some of you might get heated, like you might run a lot of heat through your body. Like I always run heat through my body, and it's not because I'm in peri. I mean, that could be that as well, but like, no, I refuse to believe that. My body is much younger than my physical age in this reality now. But I will burn a tremendous amount of heat, an unnecessary amount of heat, like an unusual, that's really interesting kind of burn for me, just because my system is, I talk about this being solar coded. It's just the interface. It's the way that I perceive information and I translate that. You plasma babies, where you're definitely body felt. I'm not talking about your field being, you feel it in your field. I'm talking about feeling it deeply, deeply in your body, your heart, like your fascia. Like it will be deeply, deeply felt. You will move through so much uncomfortability in the body, or so much uncomfortability emotionally. It will feel so heavy and so dense that it almost becomes unbearable. And those are these moments where you're just in a birth canal. And we are birthing a new reality now. We are absolutely in it, and it is deeply uncomfortable, and we have been in it for a while, and it is really uncomfortable because people don't like change, and they don't know where to look, and they don't feel like they have answers, and they're not comfortable sticking it out, and there isn't a level of discipline, or quite honestly, a level of self-love to be able to think that you're worthy of actually fighting for. And that, I think that's perhaps the greatest grief of all. And I've been moving through a bunch of it myself. I didn't say this in the recent field hub, but I took my septum piercing out, and I've had that for like close to 15 years. No, I think it's maybe only 11 or 12, but I've been thinking about it for a while, and I just kind of started to look at myself, and I go, gosh, this doesn't even fit anymore. And it was so much a part of my old Tally identity. And I knew I know exactly where I got it pierced. I know what I was feeling at the time. I know it was like my first time in 2014, 2015, like leaving the country for an extended period of time. I think I was gone for about 3 months. And it was really empowering and kind of physically freeing. I got to do a lot of fun stuff, and I got to learn how to be different, how I was received in the world differently. And I could be kind of just whoever I wanted to be at that moment. And whenever people are going through big transformations, there's always, usually a tattoo or a piercing or a hair change in the picture, at least for women. I see this with men too. But I got this septum, I was getting my entrainment session, just as a side note. And he was like, have you thought about taking out your septum? He was like, look, I'm just right in front of your energy field, and there's just like a break. It's like you can't actually conduct. And I was like, that is insane that you're saying that, because I've been thinking about this and I just haven't found the right place to go. And like this was last week. And the Monday I got it done. Tuesday I woke up absolutely, I hit the ground. And I have not been sick in so long, and it was all sinuses. So it was all this grief. And it wasn't just individual grief, but it was this collective grief of like mourning and a sadness of how I felt about some people are going to be able to try to come along with you, and some people aren't. And it's hard to hold that vision of like, well, someday they will, or someday they'll get it. And this is so temporary, and we are supposed to enjoy it. And how can you enjoy it when you feel and see so much disparaging reality going on for all different kinds of people? And this is again why I come back and meet myself in the moment, and I zoom way, way out and look at templates being created and how they repeat and where we are as a collective and what we're repeating now. When systems no longer are conducive and the field is changing, which is what it's doing, systems break down. It's no longer compatible. And right now, a lot of people are seeing that, and that is the upswing. And the belief is going to hold you and carry you longer than anything that seems to be physical security now. I mean, I've spent a long time, like years, okay, this is even pre-COVID, wandering around and being gone and not having physical location. And the illusion of safety and security is very much that. It's almost like a projected boundary that you kind of throw your identity into, and then you organize and quote unquote stabilize inside of that, but somehow, okay, things are going to continue to break down. Like whatever you settled for is going to come back again. And this is why we up level so much. So I want to move into, so my point with all of that is to hang in there. And the road gets extraordinarily narrow because it needs to. And trust more than anything that you have a guide in me, but also you have a guide in yourself and pure source. And trust that above all. Like there's nothing that you cannot transcend. There's nothing that you cannot hold. And it's all just a matter of time. So, but you have to believe that you're worth fighting for in all of this. And you have to borrow it. So borrow mine. So why certain people can't hold you, whether or not that be partners or family members or places, like you will outgrow places, okay? It's because it has everything to do with capacity, okay? It's not emotional weakness. It's not an inability, okay? It's just a capacity thing. And their system, okay, this is why certain people, places, and things can't hold you, is because their system or the system was calibrated to your old identity, your old thresholds, or your old behavior. And if, like, let's say you're in my field, for example, I usually, when I meet people out in the world, which I have for many years now, and this has happened more times than I can count, which is what I've said in the Field Hub before. I was like, people usually can't hang out with me too long before there's some kind of collapse. Meaning, you will be operating, because my field is what it is I will model a more coherent version of you, and then I will maintain that signal. And once I withdraw that signal, okay, I withdraw basically the training wheels. Once I withdraw that, there is usually a very large wobble. And I've been through this myself when I've been held by a stronger container. I would absolutely fall on my ass. And then I would have to recalibrate, pick myself back up again, and stabilize to whatever level I could stabilize at. So if any old systems were calibrated to your old identity, your old thresholds, permissions, boundaries, constraints, and your behavior, okay? And when you expand, you introduce more complexity, more intensity, and more unpredictability. My field will highlight your patterns, the things that are not congruent, not only in my field, but yours. And that eventually people are either up for the challenge and it's like training, okay? They'll show up anyways with the sore muscles kind of thing. It's conditioning, or they will absolutely collapse, retreat, and then come back from a higher level order if it's what is to be. So if their system cannot regulate at that level or update their model, okay, and I'm talking about why certain people can't uphold you. If they cannot regulate or start to entrain to your new field, or update the way that they see you or their model of you, and they're tolerant, and the way that they tolerate differences, okay, they will experience you as, overwhelming, unsafe, too much, no longer relatable, or that you've just had this like out of nowhere reaction or explosion. So they down-regulate the connection, okay? Most cannot hold themselves and you at the same time. And so I'll speak directly to you. This is about you being able to hold yourself, full stop, and letting whoever's going to fall away, but you're no longer accommodating pattern. You're not going to pander to pattern, meaning you are not going to hold other people in contempt for that. You're going to love them through their process, and you're going to speak your truth, and you're going to call things out, and you're going to do it in a loving way, and you're going to let the field, and then move on to the next. So the down-regulation of the connection is essentially what happens when people down-regulate into a different identity, okay? They will choose a former identity and then iterate that. Or when they're right up against a pattern, they will cycle all the way back to the most consistent identity and then repeat that. You see this in celebrity relationships all the time. Like Bennifer was a really good example of that. Massive levels of distortion with the pair of them. And so when they're right on the verge individually of like breaking a contract or breaking a pattern set, they will be attracted to each other, no coincidence. And then essentially they just went back like 20 years ago and then repeated it. Obviously it didn't work out, collapse ensues. But that's the identity they're basically running from that particular time. So I'm going to finish with this last part of why family systems detox as a response. So family systems are shared predictive fields, okay? They organize around roles, emotional distribution, and then identity assignments, oldest, IP, black sheep, etc. Okay? So when one person changes, it creates a prediction error across the entire system, and the system reacts. That reaction can look like sudden conflict, resurfacing of old issues. I can't believe you're bringing that shit up again from like 20 years. And you're like, oh yeah, that one time at band camp, let's talk about that shit. Or heightened sensitivity and then lots of projection. This will be the emotional detox. That's going to be normal. Okay? Because most people are operating off of a younger version of them that was very, very unmet. So the tantrums that happen are usually like a 3, 4, or 5-year-old logic. Okay? A nervous system that's really scared and needs to be held and needs to be met in a different way. And this is when you learn how to do that. The more you meet yourself, the less you have of expectations of others. And the more you can regulate your own nervous system and meet your own needs. And then you can kind of settle into the fact that you just never got what you needed. And there's a deep acceptance with that. And then another way a reaction can look like is through behavioral shifts. So someone else becomes, let's say, symptomatic. Someone else tries to increase control dynamics, or there's regression in certain members. You're going to see this where all of a sudden the IP becomes the more mature one and holds the signal, or the golden child reverts to having the rebellious era. Okay? This can be stress spikes, fatigue, anxiety symptoms. There's also children who are modeling the same reactions that their parents. So parents, when you guys detox, your kids will often show the same reaction. Like, I had eczema and now your kid has eczema. And I was like, yeah, that's a very good example of transpersonal epigenetic inheritance. Okay? If you're starting to work on martyr and you're clearing martyr and you're working on rage and suppressed emotion, and your kid all of a sudden has an outburst and then gets eczema, that is not an accident. Okay? That's a transgenerational clear out. The body is remembering. It doesn't have to create that symptom in order to remember itself. So this isn't because you've done something to them, by the way. It's because you removed a stabilizing function you used to provide. So boundary, okay, what's allowed in, what's allowed out. If what you tolerated, which was constant self-erasure or people-pleasing, if you showed up that way as the hyper caretaker, and then you start to remove that, and that is what, let's say, and that's what stabilized the system, and you start to remove that as a stabilizer, clearly the field is going to break down. So what else do I want to say? So when you continue to change your signal, okay, you're going to break unconscious agreements. You're going to expose capacity limits, and you're going to destabilize systems built on your old identity. That's reorganization under pressure. So the real question isn't like, why can't they hold you? It's, can you hold yourself without reorganizing back to make others comfortable? Because if you can, the system either updates or it releases you. Both are valid outcomes. So when you change your signal, okay, you don't just change your life. Okay, this can be nervous system with identity configuration and then the predictive model that you're running at the time. You reveal the agreements of every system you are a part of. And not every structure is built to evolve with you. And I want you guys to really hear and feel that, especially this final part, okay? You're going to reveal the agreements of every system you are a part of, and not every structure is built to evolve with you. And that includes people, places, things, etc. You don't want to be operating off of the peak version of your limited self, at least those who are not interested in this level of work. You guys are here to experience more internal peace and realize that the more combined with source you become, the less ambitious you are, because you just have a sense of feeling so seen by yourself that creates an internal sense of peace. There's not this desperate seeking of having purpose and like serving the divine and wanting to it is a feeling like whatever you're not doing is enough. You feel like you have to be doing more. And, I have a certain gift and I can see and I can do and whatever else. And how do I get more power? And how do I get more of that and more of this? All of that is still an ego running filter. I want to be of service. I want to feel like I have more value. Well, what I'm hearing is you want to be more in integrity with your connection to source. However that looks, okay, whatever the byproduct of is from that reorganization becomes a byproduct of that connection. So with SuperFreq, if all of this went away, okay, and I was not online anymore and I wasn't showing up for you or whatever else, I would still write. I would still nourish myself in a way because I have the connection to source, and that's all I've ever wanted. I've just can synthesize really intense topics, and I can do this and I can show up this way. And so it's how I've chosen to choose to serve the divine. But I can do this in very, very different ways, and it's not necessary. So the worthiness, the baseline for me is the connection to source is enough. And ultimately that is sovereign. You are sovereign within yourself. And you recognize that you are here to be deeply present and one with everything and hold the highest level of empathy that you can, which is pattern recognition without contempt for yourself and without contempt for others, which is the ultimate mastery. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much also for leaving reviews. It really helps even in with this, small but mighty, really incredible audience that we have. I mean, over 100,000 downloads, which is a lot for someone who just posts with no advertising. I mean, there's over, I think, 85 countries or almost 90 countries now that listen to this podcast. It's really amazing. I thank you all really from the bottom of my heart for being here and continue to invest in yourselves and grow together. Please leave me, again, any questions in the comments. I love reading them. I love reading your emails. Again, it's an honor to be able to show up for you, however long that is. All right, I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.